mentioned the cut down to 53, the initial 53. Here are some of the names that the Browns let go. Dustin Hopkins, the kicker, which initially Austin Schmitz will be the kicker. We'll see if that stands. They also let go veteran wide receiver Deontay Johnson. A couple of really good defensive ends. Caden Davis gets cut. Christopher Edmonds, certainly a candidate for the practice squad, was pretty good at the safety position. Amani Marshall, another guy that likely a candidate. We've heard they want Cade McDaniel back. He had an injury designation. Pierre Strong also with an injury designation. And Cure, the offensive tackle, also let go. Last night, Browns traded Kenny Pickett to the Raiders for a fifth-round pick in the 2026 draft. Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd, host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Jeff, you look at the roster right now, only running backs are Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford. 4 tight ends is another one. 10 DBs, I guess, when you and I were talking, I guess that's pretty standard. Was there anything that really surprised you?
I don't know if I would necessarily say surprised, but like you have to go through some of this and, look where this team is at. And, I know everybody, wants the team to hopefully be competitive in 2025. But, I think if we're all looking at this realistically, there's probably a better opportunity of the window is probably going to be 2026. My first impressions are there's a lot of youth here, between undrafted free agents and certainly the first legitimate Cleveland Browns draft class they've had since the Deshaun Watson trade. Dustin Hopkins, and, the thing with kickers is, in 2023, when Dustin Hopkins was pretty special, I think most of it was, fans and everybody, well, you're supposed to make the kicks. So I think when you have a great year, I don't think you necessarily get the credit you deserve. But then when you have a down year, certainly like you did in 2024, it's the weight of the world. You know what I'm saying? And every finger is pointed at you. I think the fact of the matter is that Dustin Hopkins has probably never been the same since Christmas Eve in Houston. If we remember, that was the game he got hurt, missed the rest of the regular season that year. And, in 24, he just was never the same. I think it was time to move on. The wide receiver position, the way it works with Isaiah Bond is it was going to come down to basically 3 guys for 2 spots. DeAndre Carter, Gage Lavardane, and certainly Deontay Johnson. Word was dropping last night that it looked like the Browns were going to move on from DeAndre Carter, which, basically told you, maybe that was good sign for Gage Lavardane. Now, today, the word came out, that it looked like it was going to be that Carter was staying. I think everybody thought that maybe Lavardane was in trouble, but I think it just kind of pointed out the fact that, Deontay Johnson, he's not going to bring you anything on special teams. And when we did the show yesterday, my thing was if we're even discussing whether or not Deontay Johnson has earned a roster spot, I think that's the question for us that tells us he hasn't. He needed to go out there, and he needed to look like the second best wide receiver Cleveland had this summer. And the fact of the matter is he did not look better than Jamari Thrash. And what are you going to do now? And, and he's been, for all intents and purposes, a model citizen when he's been here. But it was obvious that, 3 wide receiver sets, and the Browns do not really like to take a tight end off the field. So that means they don't go a lot of 4 wide receivers. Meant it was going to be Judy, meant it was going to be Tillman, meant it was going to be Jamari Thrash. So now you have this 29-year-old guy, to his credit, had been a good soldier, but was not going to be on the field very much and has had an issue of being a tad bit of a malcontent. I'm not saying that was the reason they did it. I think the thing they just felt is, we're going to move on from possibly a guy like Gage Lavardane, who showed us he could return, showed us he could receive, showed he could be, positive part of the offense with the ball in his hands, running jet sweeps. And DeAndre Carter is, in a lot of people's opinion, a plus returner. So it came to the point where I just think they didn't have much of a choice, and it was maybe time to move on from Johnson, because if he had proven it, I think there wouldn't have been an issue. They would have kept Deontay Johnson around. But, now when you're talking about a 7-year, 6-year difference in age between Johnson and Lavardane, who certainly looked better than Deontay Johnson in every preseason game, you ran yourself into a position where you may have moved on from a guy and said, oh, well, maybe we can get him to the practice squad. But what if you didn't? And I think that's kind of where it's at. My other impression is, there's definitely some guys who the Cleveland Browns said, you're on the 53-man roster. But, I wouldn't go, finalizing a lease just yet.